I signed up for the pottery class she said was canceled. On Monday night, the kiln in our kitchen announced itself the way only a new hobby can, by occupying every flat surface with tools that have names like verbs, ribs, loop, needle. My wife Mara had been taking a beginner pottery class at a studio in the old mill, and for 3 weeks coming home with hands that looked like the inside of a river. "Canceled this week," she said, shrugging out of her coat and sliding a wire cutter into a drawer next to the corkscrew. "Teacher's sick. Maybe next session." She said it with the calm of someone uninviting herself. "Good," I said, relieved for the break from shards curring on our windowsill. Then I felt guilty for being relieved. Marriage is a kiln. Too hot you crack, too cold nothing changes. On Tuesday I biked past the mill. The river looked obedient. The studio lights were on. Through the wide front window I saw a dozen people gathered around tables that looked like dinner if dinner could spin. On a chalkboard near the door, "Tuesday wheel 6-00830. Under it, a note in cheerful handwriting, "Welcome back, Potters." Maybe there were two teachers. Maybe the studio canceled Monday but added Tuesday. Maybe the world didn't owe me neatness. Still, the lights felt like a sentence to be read. At home, I brought it up like weather. "Studio looked busy," I said, rinsing coffee grounds into the compost. "Is the teacher better?" Mara didn't look up from twisting a ball of clay in a plastic bag. "Must be," she said. "They sent a make-up email for some groups." She tied the bag and set it on the counter like a small heart. "I'll just practice at home." I wanted to leave it there, in the stack of benign misunderstandings couples use to insulate their peace. I also wanted to be the kind of man who didn't keep a drawer in his mind labeled things I'm apparently not supposed to notice. Wednesday night, after she fell asleep on the couch with a playlist of people talking tenderly about glazing, I opened the studio website. "Registration open," it declared, and under it a blue button brighter than courtesy. The schedule showed a Thursday class called HANDS and Fire, Intermediate. The teacher's bio belonged to someone named Leon who wrote the way my high school art teacher used to talk when a student did something by accident, and it looked like intention. Thursday, I told Mara I had a 7 p.m. client meeting. "Museum bored," I said. "They love to begin after dinner, keeps them cruel." She laughed and threw me a towel to dry my hands and said, "Don't let them rename the ship gallery Skipper's Corner." We kissed like acquaintances. Mara walked in at 6:03 in a sweatshirt I had never seen and a smile I had. She wasn't alone. A man half a step behind her, late 30s, earnest jaw, the kind of posture you get when you talk while walking. He carried his own apron and a small box of tools as if he had been issued the kit that comes with the part where you are helpful. I didn't know his name, but I recognized his category. The kind of person who learns you by asking questions and then remembers the answers at exactly the right moment later. They took wheels next to each other. Leon demonstrated with a mound of clay, hands steady, elbows tucked, the wheel turning with the humility of a motor that accepts a destiny. "Center first," he said, gently insisting. "Then open, then lift, then learn how to fail without hatting the object." He said it like he'd just visited that sentence. Mara laughed and pressed her hands into clay like checking a forehead. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She was doing something human, and my chest, still a mammal, made decisions about jealousy that had nothing to do with justice. I walked downstairs because the mezzanine had begun to feel like a philosophy. In the hallway, a table sold mugs with the studio name stamped into them, and a sign asking for spare towels. Leon stood there arranging nothing in particular. Up close, he looked like a person who sleeps the righteous sleep of the extremely tired. "Can I help you?" he asked, not suspicious, just curious the way Clay is curious about hands. "I'm watching," I said. "My wife said class was canceled this week." I didn't mean to say the last part out loud. Leon paused in the kind way. "Sometimes people come to the room they need before they come to their spouse," he said, which is either a thing he says often or a thing he learned the hard way. He didn't say which. "I'm not here to blow up her kiln," I said, "just to see the temperature." He nodded and handed me a towel as if to make me someone with a task. "You can help wipe splash later." "You," she said, and handed me the piece. "You came to the room." "I did," I said. Up close the pot looked like an apology that had learned posture. "Class wasn't canceled." "It was Monday," she said. "Leon runs a Thursday for people who need more than once. I didn't tell you because I wanted to be somebody before I had to be your version of me." She rubbed clay from her fingers as if it were a spell being broken. "And because there's a guy in my Monday who looks at me like I'm interesting, and in Thursday I learned how to look at myself that way without needing the guy." "The guy," I said, which was not the correct question but was the available one. "From work," she said. "He took one class, he talks too much. He is a cardboard cutout I briefly auditioned for." She exhaled. "I wanted a door that didn't require you to hold the knob." I handed the pot back to her as if it were our child in a costume I hadn't approved but now had to acknowledge was adorable. "I wanted to hold the knob," I said. "Instead, I held the mezzanine." She stepped closer because we are still us. "That was brave," she said, "and slightly weird." "Both are true," I said. "I miss being a team that knows how to be clumsy in front of each other," she said. "Clay is mostly clumsy. That's the point." She put her hand on the pot as if it could feel this part. "Also, sometimes I want to be seen by a room not attached to our mortgage." "That seems legal," I said, and she laughed in the way that means we found the bridge. At home, we carried the pot to the kitchen table and made tea. We sat with the object between us like a translator. "I didn't intend to lie," Mara said. "I intended to avoid the conversation where you ask me why I like being near a person who likes me, and I avoided it by going to a room where Clay would exhaust the need. It mostly worked until it didn't." "I didn't intend to snoop," I said. "I intended to find out whether my jealousy should be upgraded from metaphor to policy, and then I found that mezzanines are policies." We wrote, 1. If a room starts to feel like a secret, it is. 2. If attention from a stranger is teaching you something you want, invite me to learn it with you, or tell me you need to learn it first. 3. If you register for a Thursday, say Thursday. 4. If someone says mezzanine, it means I'm afraid and trying not to be. 5. Put something we made with our hands in the middle of our table at least once a week, even if it's ugly. We taped the list to the fridge, with the goofy realtor magnet shaped like a house. Sunday Mara took me to open studio. Leon nodded and pointed at an empty wheel. "Center," he said, then left me to prove I was not as special as water. I failed in 5 different ways and liked it. Mara sat across from me and made a bowl that looked like a bowl. I made a low, wide thing that could have been ashtray, soap dish, or metaphor. On the way home, we didn't talk about him or Leon or the mezzanine. We talked about whether the cat could be trusted not to lick glaze, and whether bowls are just cylinders that learned diplomacy. This is not a parable in which the charismatic teacher turns out to be a villain and the earnest coworker a thief. It is a smaller story about a wheel and a mezzanine, and the way a marriage learns to say the thing before the thing becomes a sentence written on a website. Sometimes the verb is watch. Sometimes it's center. Sometimes it's fail without hatting the object. And sometimes it's this: stay at the table while the clay decides what it wants to be, and keep your hands in the water until the shape begins to tell the truth.